Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the John DeRugis Show. It is Friday, January 21st. I'm shooting this at 9 o'clock at night. Had a long week of meetings, so I, kind of detoxed and kind of took a break for a little bit today. But I wanted to shoot this podcast regarding macro and micro content and how you can create roughly 20 to 30 pieces of content off of one macro piece of content. Whether that is maybe a blog, whether it's a video, maybe a podcast, maybe it's a vlog, whatever it may be, how you can actually create 25 to 30 pieces of content from that one individual piece. So first, let me kind of dive into this a little bit. Let me pull up a diagram on how this can work. So first, we need to define what is macro content, what is micro content. Macro content is what I said there, blogs, videos, podcasts, all of these different things. Micro content is everything else. Those are, little snippets of audio or snippets of video, Instagram posts, tweets, LinkedIn posts, LinkedIn articles, maybe even you could do a blog as a micro piece of content depending on how you sort things. But maybe a short YouTube short, a Instagram reel. All of those are different types of macro pieces or micro pieces of content, my bad. So first, let's start off with your macro, and this is how kind of the diagram will work. You will have your macro piece. So let's say in this case, it is a podcast or a white paper. Let's just go with a podcast. So let's say you have your podcast as the top. What you want to focus on is actually creating value within that podcast. And then from there, you want to split it up in the next level of, I guess you want to call your content creation macro, micro diagram into a couple different kinds of content. So you have your podcast that'll actually go out to whatever platform you're on. So there's one piece. You have your other piece that could be translated or transcribed rather into a blog. There's two pieces of content. And then you have your third line, which is social. Now, social is very broad, very wide. And you could do this in many different ways, in many different platforms, with many different tactics. So you also have oh my gosh, it's late. Anyways, like I said, these videos are going to be completely unedited. Same thing with the podcast, depending on whether they're listening to this on Anchor or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you're watching this on YouTube, completely unedited. I want this to be completely raw. So when it comes to these actual social pieces and micro pieces of content, you want to think about, okay, what platforms am I going to post on? So you have Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, maybe even YouTube if you want to do a video there. So let's just start off with Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. The platforms that have graphic / mainly graphic and video capabilities. I'm going to exclude the video only for the time being, but let's talk about those. So you have Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So you have a LinkedIn article. You could do that. There's one. And then you have all the other types. You could do a new podcast post. You could talk about the main point in your podcast. You could make a list of main points within them. You could snip up pieces of video and do quotes. You could do text quotes. You could do audio clips. There's so many different ways you can do that. You can do that on each platform. So let's say you did that for Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn with, let's say, a new episode post. So there's one, you have your main point. Number two, you have a list of maybe things that you talked about in your podcast. Maybe it's bullet pointed. 3, and you have quotes. You could have as many quotes as you want. Let's just hypothetically say 1 just to make the number simple. So there's 4 pieces of content that can go out on one particular platform. And for Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, you have 4 pieces of content per each one of those. So that's 12 pieces of content right there. So to kind of keep track of everything, we have our audio, which is going to be the podcast. That's 1. We have our blog. That's number 2. We have our LinkedIn article. That's number 3. And then we have 4 other main content types or posts that can go out across those 3 platforms. So we're looking right now at 16 different content types already. Next, let's talk about the actual video platform. You could take episode snippets. You could talk about your new episode that's out. You could talk about your main point, your list, maybe a little bit from your podcast. All of those different things. You can distribute that on TikTok and on YouTube. You can also have your entire podcast go on YouTube if you wanted to. So there's 17 right there. And then for each one of those, TikTok and YouTube, you have 4 pieces of content like I mentioned. So 4 times 2, you got 8. So right there, we're looking at 25 pieces of content. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. You could have many different types. You could have many video snippets and increase it to 30 pieces of content. You could solely focus on quotes. You could do that there. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Just make sure you're providing value and you're authentic within your content. So to kind of sum everything up, because this is a very simplified version of this macro micro content strategy, you want to focus on creating a macro piece of content, which is a blog. It could be a podcast. It could be a article, a white paper, whatever it may be. And then from that one piece of content, you want to distribute it to, obviously your podcast platform, your blog, whatever it may be, and then divide that into social posts based on different platforms. Let's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, all of those different kinds. I actually didn't even include Twitter in here. So if you want to include Twitter, there's 30 right there. Then from the original 25. So you could put out pieces from your podcast or from your article. You could have quotes. You could do lists. You could do snippets of video if you record it. You can have your main point be conveyed. And you can do a new episode post. There are so many different ways to do this, especially when it comes to something that is either written or in video or audio form. You can transcribe that and get the actual direct quotes. You can put the video up on all different platforms. There are so many other ways to do this. And so with that being said, that is how you can create 25 to 30 pieces of content from one piece of macro content.